Okay, these are kind of the tools you need. Obviously, you got to set up your hive with single deep. Now, I like to just explain with a package, and you should just to remind everybody what you've learned up to this point, right? We're dumping a pack. We're going to hang a queen in. We're going to release a cork so that she can get out in a couple of days. The bees are we're going to feed them. She's going to get out. She's going to start laying. So a package of bees is about 10,000 bees. Generally can cover about 5 frames. When is that population going to increase? It's not going to increase for probably a good 4 to 5 weeks, because even though it only takes 3 weeks for that first round, right? So a little more than 3 weeks, because it takes her a couple of days, 2 or 3 days to get out and start laying. So we're looking at, let's say, at least 3.5 weeks before new bees are starting to enter into this colony, this package that we're going to install into a colony, make it into a colony. So in the meantime, in that 3.5 weeks, you have bees dying off naturally, right? Because they only live 6 weeks in the summertime. So in order for this to get back to the population that we were and start increasing, where you need a second box, it's probably going to be in that 5-week range. So it stays in that box. Some people make mistake by putting 2 boxes on right at the beginning, or a second box after 1 week. That's not what we want to do. We want them to get established onto these, and it's going to take, minimum of 4+ weeks, as many as 5. And that'll a lot will depend on the weather. We got some warm weather coming up, so there's lots of foraging. I was looking at hives today, lots of pollen coming in, lots of nectar coming in, so the bees can build up a lot quicker in those situations. Okay, some of the things. I'm going to just tip this box and show you what I have. Here's my bottom board. Here's my deep box. I have a frame feeder here. And so I'm going to fill this up with syrup first. I have my hive tool, my knife, my syrup made. So I'll fill that up first. And a lot of you will have undrawn frames that are brand new. The bees haven't drawn comb out on them yet. So I happen to grab some frames that are drawn out. If you're a second, third year beekeeper, you'll have the ability to use some drawn frames maybe if your hive didn't make it through. I kind of went to a bunch of places today and threw out a lot of frames. See this frame? This frame was probably built last year. Look at the color of the wax. It's white, a little bit yellow. It's not black. And what happens is if the frame gets too old, there's all kinds of things that build up in that wax. There's bacteria from the mites defecating. There could be some, environmental things such as pesticides, herbicides, fungicides that can all build up in that wax. So bees do a lot better on newer wax. So don't use frames like if you buy a nuke and the frames are black. Discard those frames the next year, and try to use nice, clean frames. Either completely undrawn or frames that are only a year or 2. My rule of thumb is once they get 3 seasons, you want to start changing them. Honey frames are different than brood frames. Honey frames are generally white comb, so you don't have to change those out. But brood frames, you should start to think about changing them out after about 3 years. Okay, so here's our 3-pound package. We just got back from our trip Sunday. I left Tingsboro on Thursday, got down to Moultrie, Georgia on Friday, loaded me up on Saturday, and got back up here on Sunday. Gave out these yesterday, saved this package for you people today so we can show you an installation. So today, one of the big things is when you install, one of the first things I do is look at the temperature. We're installing now, it's almost 6:30 at night, and we have a temperature in Topsfield of 70 degrees. And then in Tingsboro, where these bees are going tonight, later on tonight, it's going to be in the mid-50s. So not too bad. Those are good conditions to install a package. And so what I want to do here is, I'm not a big fan of sugar water. I am a big fan of water, because water will evaporate quicker, it doesn't make the bees sticky, and it accomplishes what I want it to accomplish, is to not have lots of bees flying around. I want to be able to dump these bees right into here. I want them to go into the hive and not be flying around, especially if I have multiple hives that I'm installing right together. So I just, a little bit lightly with water on this side, and then again here on this side. And then what I'll do is I kind of just tap them down, and then I'll spray the top. And you'll see when I install this that there'll be some bees flying around, but not like if I didn't do it. So this is just a piece of Luan that they usually have a couple of staples on. We take that off. This is the way Rossmann does it. Some of these package distributors do things different ways, but the way Rossmann does it, we have a can, we have a tab with the queen attached to the can. So I just pick that up with my fingers, I turn it back and forth, take it out, take my queen out, shake the bees off of it. And a big thing here is I want to make sure she's alive. Okay, good job, Kath, check and make sure the queen is alive. I didn't check her before, Kathy did, so we always check the queens before we give them out to people, so we kind of knock the bees down and we check to make sure that the queen's alive. Some people travel a distance, they come pick up the bees, so we had probably a dozen out of 660, so 12 we found dead. We had to take them out and replace them with a new queen. If you have a situation where your queen dies, you want to call your whoever you got your package for, so they can give you another queen right away. Okay, I have a cork here and a cork here. Which one do I take it out of?
The sugar end.
Thank you, the sugar end. All right, so we take that cork out. Sometimes they'll break apart a little bit, so you want to make sure you get it all out. Don't poke any holes through it. We don't want the queen to get out quicker. As a matter of fact, if some of you have brand new frames, not drawn, you can leave that cork in for a day or two and let the bees build some comb up and then take it out. If that queen gets out too quickly and the bees have not built enough comb out there, in some cases the bees will take off and they'll abscond. And so it's not a bad idea if you have brand new frames to leave a cork in for a day or two extra. Okay. So you can see by watering them, I don't have any bees flying around. I'm going to take that queen and I'm going to point her in my direction, but I'm going to have the frames side by side. I don't want to put the screen into the frame. I want the bees to have access to that screen. So I'm going to hang her just like this. I'm going to drop it down. What I'm doing is I'm dropping it down below the top bar here, just lower than that. And then I'm going to press it in tight. That's going to hold it in there, and then I'm going to just push these frames in a little bit tighter. There's going to be a little bit of a gap here. Oh, I can't do that. Good intentions, but not smart. So there's going to be a little bit of a gap right here, and you can come and look at this if you want before I put the bees in, to just see where I have this queen hanging. And she's right there. Right. What I like to do here is I have my syrup on this side. I want the queen to be close to the syrup so the bees can cluster near the syrup and around the queen, and it's easier for them to feed off of that syrup.
So even though you have drawn frames and there's pollen and whatnot out and about now, you're still feeding syrup?
Yes, so the question is, even though we have food and we have pollen, do we still want to feed? Yes. It only takes a couple of days, you know, of lousy weather, rain, cold, whatever, and the bees can't forage. But when they have no resources, and even though these frames are drawn, there's no honey in them. Sometimes we have a honey frame that we can put in there, but you're always going to want to feed syrup, because syrup will encourage the queen to lay. It's like an artificial honey flow. So even if you have honey in there, it might not encourage the queen to lay like feeding syrup will. So the bees feel like there's nectar coming into the hive and the queen's ready to lay. Okay.
So even if you had drawn frames and a frame of honey, you would still feed syrup?
Correct.
Okay.
I would. So the question is, even if I had a frame of honey, would I still feed syrup? Yes, I would. I do both. Okay, so we have our package. We're ready to dump them in. I'm going to do it one more time. I'm going to knock it down a little bit. And a little more water. That's good. And now and see that's what they go by. That's a 3-pound package. You have the line here where the can is. When you knock these bees down, that should come to right at that line. And so that's a 3-pound package. And then, so now we're ready to just dump them in. So a little bit of shake there, a little bit of shake. We got some bees flying around, so I can use a little more water if I want. And then what I'm going to do is, my hands are not big enough to palm a basketball, but I can palm a package. So I can hold it here and just knock all the bees down and then gently put them out. Some people like to put a package in and let the bees come out of the package by themselves. I'm not one of those people. I don't believe in it. You want to get the bees in there as quick as possible. I mean, really, here, I might have no more than, if I keep going back and forth, I can be pretty stubborn. I can get almost every single bee out of there.
What makes them want to go down into the frame and not
So,
just take off?
what makes them want to go down into the frame? There's comb here. The queen is there. And so, you can see that they're really, again, with the water, they're not going to fly as much, but they really want to go down into that comb. And so I can take my hive tool and even spread them around a little bit, gently spread them around. Some of them are coming off the back. I can move them off. And then what I do then is I take my rim board, and again I can come up the side here. And now I have a pollen patty. And you can pull some of the paper off if you like. And then what I'll do is I just put the pollen patty right on. That's why I use the rim board. And so this package may have been shaken either Thursday or Friday, but let's just say it was shook on Thursday. So they were in there Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. They've been in there 5 days. So it's good, you know, a lot of buzzing. The bees, their tails are in the end. They're shooting off pheromones. They're getting orientated around here. So questions? So by the time another hour goes by, all these bees here will be inside. And then what I'll do is, I have these entrance closures. I'll put it here, I'll staple it, put it in my truck, and bring them back. And we'll set them up at the colony. I have a stand for them ready to go behind a bear fence. I started using straps probably almost when I first started keeping bees. I really like them for a lot of different reasons, but you know, it'll keep the cover from being blown off. If your hive is in any place where somebody might want to go and be curious and lift the lid off, they're not going to be able to do it as easily with this on there. And then so I like them. Rocks to me, sometimes they can get blown off or knocked off or forgot to be put on. And where this, if you do it every time, it keeps the hive secure.
A question?
Yes.
Can I turn, so you don't have gloves on, and I'm just thinking of you taught us about how with swarms they have no honey to protect. Right now, do they just have nothing to protect, so they're not as aggressive as they might be?
I'm going to see if I understand the question correctly. We're talking about the aggressiveness of the bees. Right now, they're very calm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. I'm going to say 19 out of 20, maybe 29 out of 30. You'll get into a situation like this where the bees are very calm, very docile. I'll know the second I pull this can out if the bees are docile or not, and some of them aren't. So wear your gear, and make sure wear your gloves if you're not used to handling bees. And why are they docile? Yes, because they are like a swarm. They have been feeding, so they have syrup in their stomach. There's still half the can left. And so if they were a swarm in a tree and they ate up all the syrup that was in their stomach from when they swarmed, and they sat there for about 3 or 4 days, they can get defensive. If they're just there, they just landed in their swarm, they're usually very docile. So these bees, they have food in their stomach, very docile. That's probably not the only reason. Has to do with their genetics and their temperament too, how you handle them. But yeah, these are pretty docile. Yeah. Other questions?
Do you wear gloves normally when you're beekeeping?
Not generally. Yeah, not my personality. But listen, I used gloves for the first 3 or 4 years that I kept bees until I was comfortable. And you'll know there's nothing wrong with wearing gloves. It's just I'm used to working my hands. I'm more careful when I use my hands than I would be if I have my gloves. But the exception to the rule is if I go to a yard where a bear knocked the hive over, I'm wearing gloves. Yeah. Yes.
If you're using a nuke, when would you add the second box?
When you're installing a nuke, when would you add the second box? Yes. Okay. So a nuke is on 5 frames, and the bees they're already being born, right? Especially if you have 4 frames of brood. Generally speaking, it could be as soon as a week, but I would install it. I would check it a week later, and if the bees have gone from 5 frames to 7 in 1 week, I would add a second box on at that time.
Thanks.
Yeah. Yes.
Is it a good idea to use a smoker when you're doing the install?
So the question is, when you're installing a package, should you use a smoker? I think when you're using water, it's the same thing. Okay, it affects the bees, it calms them down, it's wet, they're not gonna fly at you, and they're pretty much gonna stay. When you install a nuke, yes, absolutely use a smoker. And every time you go into a hive, use a smoker. Every time. I get, sometimes when we go out to our yards, some people go out, and as I'm lighting the smoker, they want to get going, they want to get to work, and they're going and trying to open hives. I said, no, wait, hold on, let's get the smoker and smoke all the hives. It's much more pleasant. If you start lifting, top covers off without smoking them, you're training your bees to be defensive, and nobody needs to work like that. The bees are docile. You just have to treat them gently.
If you're using a Boardman feeder, the
Yeah.
jar feeder, what is that?
Okay.
That's on top with the box over it?
So if you choose to use a Boardman feeder, the Boardman feeder can fit into the entrance. I don't like to use it that way. You can use it that way. I prefer to put it on top of the inner cover. Make sure your colony is flat. I mean, so because if you tilt it, it will flow out. And same thing with when you put it in the entrance. If your hive is tilted back, some of that syrup, and once it goes, there's no stopping it. It can drain right out. So I like to put a Boardman feeder on top of the inner cover, and then I'll put an empty box around it. Only the bees from that hive now can have access to that. Where if it sits here, you might have some other bees that will try to get there, and it's not good to expose your syrup to the sun if it's in a glass. It's better if you don't. So I like to put it on top of the inner cover, empty box, and a top cover on top. Yeah.
A couple of questions online.
Go ahead.
I think you covered this, but maybe just to reiterate, do you put the entrance reducer on when you install the package?
I don't use entrance reducers. So I feel it's very important to have an airflow coming into the hive and out. The only time I'm going to use an entrance reducer is if I feel that hive is getting robbed. So entrance reducers to me restrict the airflow coming in, and therefore you're not going to have as much coming out. So I only use them if I feel that they're getting robbed. Now you can flip your bottom board over and put it on the smaller entrance. That's okay. And then we usually do, and I don't have it with me, but I usually have a mouse guard, which is hardware cloth, and I'll stick that into the entrance. Yes.
Second question, how much sugar water do they consume?
So how much sugar water will they consume? On warm days, it could go either way. We're coming into some warm temperature days. So the bees might decide to go out and forage and bring in syrup and not use the syrup that's in my feeder, or they might drink it down very quickly. And so you're gonna check your queen in, usually 3 days. My recommendation, right? I've been seeing queens get out this year. They're getting out in about 2 days. So 2 to 3 days. Third day, I'm going to go in. I'm going to see if the queen has, made it out, and then I'm going to take that queen cage out, close it up, and check it a week later. If there is a problem, the queen gets eaten up by the bees, the queen is dead in the cage. The sooner you find out what's going on and what the problem is, the quicker you can fix it. And so we want to check after 3 days. A week after that, we want to go in, and at that point you're going to see eggs and larvae, and then the next week you're going to go in and you're going to see a nice caproot pattern. And so if you go in and the queen's dead in the cage, or now you got to check those frames. Sometimes they shake a queen into a package, and so that's why the bees don't take care of the queen in the cage. So you got to check to see if there's eggs, and if she's dead, there's no eggs, you need to call your supplier and get another queen.
And the last question on the line is it supposed to be tilted slightly forward
so typically, yes, you want to tilt your hive slightly forward, right? And so that if it rains, that and you're not going to have moisture going in and cooling on your bottom board. So slightly, ever so slightly tilted forward is yes, it's good. When we look to produce comb honey, we want it perfectly flat. We feel it produces the best comb honey when the hive is flat. But you don't want to be tilted backwards. So either flat or slightly one bubble forward. Yes.
Do you need to do that if you have a screened bottom board?
No, then you'd be flat. The question is, what if you have a screen bottom board? Then just keep it flat, and the water will go through the screen. Yes.
Do you ever swap out the syrup, the sugar syrup you put in the feeder? Does it go bad after a while? Does it start to
I'm glad you asked that, because I don't think I completed my answer on the other one. When you go in 4 days, top off the sugar water. If you find after a week that they're not taking it because they're bringing nectar and that's what they choose to do, they will choose whether they want to take it or not. And so in some cases you could feed up to 5 or 6 gallons, and other cases you might feed 2 or 3. If they're not taking the syrup, it could be an indication, if they're not taking any at all, that something's wrong. I would keep an eye on that and make sure that the queen gets out and she's laying and there's food being stored in the frames. But it will go sour after a while depending on what you use. So the thinner if you're going sugar and water, the thinner you make it, it's gonna go bad quicker. Putting honeybee healthy or amino B those can help preserve your sucrose, so that's a good thing. But you can smell it. If it smells sour, pull it out and replace it. So it's good questions. Yes.
How long do you leave the frame feeder inside the hive?
I leave the frame feeder inside probably until I put the second box on and they've built out at least 5 frames in the second box. And then I will remove the frame feeder.
Oh, 5 frames in the second box.
5 frames in the second box.
And you put the frame feeder in the top when you put the new box on? Or
It's flip a coin. I've done it both ways. Sometimes I just leave it there in the bottom. The question is, when you put the second box on, what do you do with the frame feeder? Most of the times I just leave it in the bottom box. But you can bring it up to the top. And then what I'll do is, when they build out 5 or 6 frames in the second box, I'll remove the frame feeder and I'll take 2 frames of brood from the top box and put them. If it's wood frames, your feeder takes up 2 frames. If it's plastic, it takes up 1. So I'll take that 1 or 2 frame and I'll brood in the top box and move it to the bottom box and take the frame feeder out. So now I have 10 complete frames in the bottom box. And then the bees will build up from that. All right? Time to go inside, and then maybe we'll have some more questions.